There was a woman who had spent many years praying for her son. She prayed when he was small, and she prayed when he grew older. She prayed when he was happy, and she prayed when he was silent. She prayed when life seemed easy, and she prayed when life became difficult. Her prayers were never loud or fancy. They were simple, honest, and full of love. She did not always know how to explain what she felt, but she knew one thing in her heart. God had a plan for her son, and that plan was bigger than anything she could see with her own eyes. Her son was a bright child when he was young. He had a kind heart and a curious mind. He loved learning new things. He loved running outside, asking questions, and making people smile. He was the kind of boy who could fill a room with energy, without trying. The woman used to watch him and think about the future with hope. She imagined him growing into a good man, a strong man, a wise man, and a man who would honor God in all he did. She held those hopes quietly in her heart and thanked God for every gift she saw in him. But as years passed, life became harder than she expected. Her son began to face challenges that slowly changed the way he moved through the world. Some of the things he struggled with were easy to notice, and some were hidden deep inside him. He lost confidence in himself. He became unsure of his path. He carried disappointment after disappointment. At times he seemed strong on the outside, but inside he was fighting battles no one could see. There were days when he looked tired before the day even began. There were days when his words became short and his smile became rare. There were days when his heart seemed far away even when his body was near. The woman felt this deeply. She saw the changes and carried the weight of them in her own heart. She asked herself many questions. Had she failed him? Had she missed something important? Had she prayed enough? Had she guided him well enough? These thoughts came often, especially in the quiet hours of the night when the house was still and the world was asleep. She would sit alone and think about her son with tears in her eyes. She wanted to protect him from pain. She wanted to remove every burden from his life. She wanted to give him peace by force if she could, but she could not do that. All she could do was love him, pray for him, and trust God with him. That was not easy. Faith is often spoken about as if it is simple, but the truth is that faith can be very difficult when you're watching someone you love struggle. It is easier to believe when everything is going well. It is harder to believe when the future looks uncertain. It is harder to believe when your son is not walking the path you expected. It is harder to believe when your prayers seem unanswered. It is harder to believe when the pain lasts longer than you hoped. Yet this woman kept believing. She believed even when her feelings changed. She believed even when her son did not change quickly. She believed even when the situation looked worse before it looked better. She believed because she knew that God's promise was not built on human strength. It was not built on perfect timing, perfect behavior, or perfect understanding. It was built on God himself. And if God makes a promise, that promise does not break. It may take time. It may go through seasons. It may move in ways we do not expect, but it does not fail. At first, she did not always feel strong in that belief. Some mornings she woke up with courage. Other mornings she woke up with fear. On some days she felt calm, and on other days she felt close to giving in to worry. She would look at her son and wonder how much more he could carry. She would see his tired face and think about the storms in his heart. She would want to rush in and fix everything at once. But each time fear rose in her, she returned to prayer. She returned to the promise. She returned to the truth that God had not forgotten her son. She began to understand something very important. The promise of God does not always mean a life without trouble. It often means God's presence through the trouble. It means that what is broken is not beyond repair. It means that what looks delayed is not denied. It means that what seems lost can still be found. It means that even when a son walks through a hard season, God is still able to guide him, shape him, guard him, and bring him forward. This truth became the anchor of her heart. There were people around her who gave advice. Some told her to stop worrying. Some told her to be stricter. Some told her to let him fail so he could learn. Some told her to move on and stop expecting too much. Their words came from different places, but none of them could fully understand the love she carried for her son. She listened politely, but she knew that the deepest wisdom would come from God. She needed guidance that could not be shaken by opinions. She needed peace that came from heaven, not from human talk. So she kept turning back to God. She asked God to protect her son from wrong choices. She asked God to place wise people in his life. She asked God to open doors that were meant for him. She asked God to close doors that would lead him away from purpose. She asked God to heal his heart, clear his mind, strengthen his spirit, and give him courage. She asked God to help her be patient, because she knew that a worried heart can become a restless heart, and a restless heart can make fearful choices. She wanted to be steady for her son, not shaky. She wanted to be a source of comfort, not another source of pressure. That change did not happen overnight. It came slowly. It came through many quiet mornings and many quiet nights. It came through tears wiped away before anyone saw them. It came through choosing peace when anxiety tried to take over. It came through trusting God when she wanted quick answers. It came through learning to speak life over her son instead of fear. It came through reminding herself again and again that God's promise for her son could not fail. One day, after a long season of struggle, her son came home looking more tired than usual. He did not speak much. He moved slowly. His face carried the weight of many unspoken things. The woman saw him and felt a familiar ache rise in her chest. She knew he was hurting. She knew something inside him was heavy. She wanted to ask him everything at once, but she stopped herself. She had learned that sometimes a hurting heart does not need pressure first. It needs safety. It needs to be calm. It needs love that does not demand performance. So she gave him that. She made a simple meal. She kept the room peaceful. She let him rest. She did not fill the silence with fear. She did not rush to conclusion. She did not say things that would make him feel smaller. She chose gentleness. She chose patience. She chose to be a place where he could breathe. That evening, he sat quietly at the table, barely touching the food. His eyes looked far away, as if part of him had gone into another room and had trouble returning. The woman watched him with deep compassion. She could tell he felt lost in ways he could not explain. He may not have had the words, but she understood enough to know that his soul was in need of comfort. She prayed in her heart while sitting beside him, asking God to reach the places she could not reach. This became a turning point in the story. Not because everything changed in one day, but because the mother stopped treating the moment like a problem to solve and started treating it like a person to love. She realized that her son's difficulty did not mean God had failed. It meant he was in a season where grace was needed more than before. It meant that the promise was still alive, even if the process was painful. From that point on, she became even more careful with her words. She stopped saying things that carried fear. She stopped speaking as if the situation were hopeless. She stopped comparing her son's journey to the lives of other young men. She stopped measuring his growth by what other people were doing. Instead, she began to see his life as a unique story in God's hands. She understood that God works in ways that are not always fast, but are always wise. Her son did not become strong in one day. He did not suddenly understand everything. He did not wake up and have all his problems disappear. But small changes began to appear. He started to talk a little more. He began to spend less time hiding. He began to ask questions again. He began to show moments of interest in the things around him. These were small steps, but to his mother, they were precious signs that God was at work. She learned not to dismiss small progress. She learned not to wait only for dramatic breakthroughs before she gave thanks. She learned that healing often begins quietly. A burden begins to lift a little. A dark thought loses some of its strength. A closed heart opens just enough to let light enter. A tired face softens for a moment. A silent room becomes a little less heavy. These small things matter. They are part of the promise moving forward. As the days passed, the woman also learned how to guard her own heart. She knew that fear could wear a person down if it was allowed to stay too long. So she became careful about what she fed her mind. She chose faith-filled thoughts over fearful ones. She chose prayer over panic. She chose trust over endless imagination. She chose to remember God's past faithfulness instead of being consumed by present worry. Every time she remembered how God had helped before, her heart found strength for the next day. She thought about times when her son had been protected in ways she could not explain. She thought about moments when a door had closed just in time. She thought about people who had shown kindness at the exact moment it was needed. She thought about unexpected answers to prayer that had come after long waiting. All of these memories became evidence in her spirit. They reminded her that God had been faithful before, and he would be faithful again. This is how belief grows. It grows when we remember. It grows when we keep looking back at God's goodness while walking forward through uncertainty. It grows when we refuse to let fear write the final chapter. It grows when we speak the promise aloud even before we see the result. The woman began speaking the promise quietly over her son each day. She would not do it to control him. She would do it to cover him in faith. She would remind herself that her son's life was not slipping from God's hand. She would remember that a child belongs to God before he belongs to any human plan. She would think about all the ways a son can wander, get lost, become confused, or feel overwhelmed, and yet still be found by grace. This gave her peace. Her son slowly began to notice something different in her. He noticed that she was calmer. He noticed that she was less afraid. He noticed that she listened without jumping to conclusions. He noticed that she did not overwhelm him with words. He noticed that she seemed to carry a deep steadiness that had not been there before. He may not have understood the source at first, but her peace began to affect him. A peaceful home often becomes the first place where a wounded heart starts to heal. The woman's own faith grew stronger through this season. At the beginning, she had wanted the promise to save her son quickly, but as time passed, she understood that the promise was doing more than changing his circumstances. It was also changing her. It was teaching her how to let go of control. It was teaching her how to wait without breaking. It was teaching her how to love without fear. It was teaching her that trusting God is not passive. It is active. It is a daily choice. It is a moment-by-moment surrender. There were days when the old fear returned. On those days, she would feel like she had made no progress at all. But instead of giving in, she would return to the same truth. God's promise for her son cannot fail. She would say it to herself while walking through the house. She would say it while sitting in silence. She would say it while doing ordinary tasks. She would say it when she was tired. She would say it when she felt hopeful. She would say it until the word became a steady rhythm in her heart. This was not pretending that problems did not exist. This was choosing not to let problems become bigger than God. This was not denial. This was faith. As the months went on, the son took steps that showed his life was still moving. He began to rebuild parts of himself that had felt broken. He found the courage to face things he had been avoiding. He made better choices. He started to believe that his future was not ruined. He slowly became more open to guidance. He still had difficult days, but the difficult days no longer defined him in the same way. His mother saw this change and gave thanks. She did not take credit for it. She knew that prayer had been her role, but God had done the work. She had simply stood in faith long enough to see the fruit begin to show. She had been a covering, a steady hand, a calm voice, and a faithful witness. She had refused to let go of the promise, even when the path felt long. That is one of the deepest lessons in this story. Many people give up too soon because they do not understand how God works over time. They want immediate proof. They want visible results right away. But the life of a son, like the life of any person, is often shaped in hidden places first. Roots grow underground before a tree grows tall above it. So it is with faith. A promise may be working long before it becomes visible. The woman understood this now. She no longer judged the promise by the speed of the process. She judged it by the character of the one who made it. Since God is faithful, the outcome could be trusted. Since God is wise, the timing could be trusted. Since God is loving, the journey could be trusted. Her son's story continued to unfold. He did not become perfect, because no one does, but he became more stable. He became more aware of his life. He began to show responsibility. He began to rebuild hope. He learned that hardship does not cancel destiny. He learned that failure is not the end of a life. He learned that being weak in one season does not mean he will always be weak. He learned that the same God who carried him through hardship can lead him into purpose. The mother also grew in her own understanding. She saw that her son's difficult season had not only tested him, it deepened her faith. It had taught her to depend on God in a more mature way. It showed her that believing is not only for the beginning of a journey, it is also for the middle, where the road is long and the answer is not yet visible. It is for the days when your knees are tired from kneeling in prayer. It is for the evenings when your heart aches and you still choose hope. It is for the hours when you have no proof except the promise itself. That promise became her strength. She came to see that when God says something over his son, no storm can erase it. No setback can cancel it. No human failure can destroy it. No delay can make it false. The promise may pass through struggle, but struggle is not stronger than God. It may pass through confusion, but confusion is not stronger than God. It may pass through pain, but pain is not stronger than God. It may pass through tears, but tears are not stronger than God. Years later, when the son looked back on that season, he saw it differently. At the time, he had felt trapped, confused, and tired. He had felt uncertain about himself and uncertain about life. But now he could see the quiet strength that had carried him. He could see the prayers that had surrounded him. He could see the patience that had waited for him. He could see the gentle faith that had not let go. He could see that he had not been abandoned. He had been guided. His mother looked back too. She remembered the long nights. She remembered the silent prayers. She remembered the fear that tried to rise. She remembered the promise that kept her standing. And when she looked at her son now, she saw more than a recovered season. She saw a testimony. She saw evidence that God's promise can hold a life through the hardest times. She saw that faith had been worth it. That is why this story matters. It is not only about one mother and one son. It is about every parent who is waiting, every heart that is praying, every family that is hoping, every person who is wondering whether God still sees their child. The answer is yes. God sees. God knows. God is working. The promise is still alive. It has not failed. It will not fail. A son may go through hard times. He may struggle with fear, pressure, confusion, disappointment, weakness, or pain. He may have days when he feels far from where he should be. He may fall, pause, or wander. But God is not finished. The promise over his life is not canceled by his present struggle. The promise is stronger than the struggle. The promise is deeper than the pain. The promise is older than the problem and greater than the season. So the guidance in this story is simple. Do not give up too soon. Do not speak defeat over your son. Do not let fear become your constant voice. Do not assume that one hard season decides a whole future. Keep praying. Keep believing. Keep loving. Keep speaking life. Keep trusting God's timing. Keep your heart steady in faith. Keep remembering that what God has promised, he is able to complete. There will be moments when you cannot see the full picture. That is all right. You do not need to see everything to trust God. There will be moments when your son seems distant. That is all right too. Love can still reach him. There will be moments when the path seems slow. That is not failure. That is process. There will be moments when you feel weak. That does not mean your faith is gone. It means you need to rest in God again. This mother's story teaches that belief is not built only in easy seasons. It is built in hard ones. It is built when you choose hope in the middle of uncertainty. It is built when you trust a promise more than the fear. It is built when you look at your son and see not only his current struggle, but also the hand of God over his future. And that future is not empty. It is not lost. It is not broken beyond repair. It is in God's hands. So believe. Believe when the night is long. Believe when the answers are slow. Believe when your son is quiet. Believe when he is tired. Believe when the situation looks uncertain. Believe when your heart feels weak. Believe when the promise seems far away. Believe because God's promise for your son cannot fail. Believe because God does not forget his own words. Believe because your son is not outside God's reach. Believe because grace is still working. Believe because the story is not over. Believe because the one who began the work is faithful to finish it. And one day, when the season has passed and the tears have less power, you will look back and see that what felt delayed was not denied. What felt hidden was still growing. What felt impossible was already being shaped by God's hand. You will see that the promise was never dead. It was alive all along. That is the hope this story leaves behind. A son may go through difficult times, but he is not abandoned. A mother may cry, but she is not forgotten. A prayer may seem small, but heaven hears it. A promise may take time, but it cannot fail. So stand firm. Keep faith. Trust God. Your son is held. Your son is known. Your son is covered. Your son is being guided. And God's promise for your son cannot fail.